Hey, what is up, you guys? This is Eric with OzoneTCG. Today we're going to be taking a look at the top 32 for YCS Las Vegas, the remote duel tournament, which one of our own OzoneTCG members, Zohair Khan, actually made top 8. Before we get to the video, I just want to give a brief overview. I know I've been in videos for the past few days. I've actually been sick, feeling a little bit better, had a fever. We're doing better though now. Yeah, so we're going to try and push out some more videos for this. Just been mostly covering the new metagame since the previous ban list dropped, especially since Zohair topped. This is a really special YCS. I'm really glad that he did top. You guys can check out the deck profile we have here or on MST.TV's channel. Please be sure to check that out. Of course, as always, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more Yu-Gi-Oh content. Let's go ahead and get into the video. Alrighty, and as you guys can see on screen, we're going to have two charts right here. You can see the top 32 representation, then the representation for adventure decks, or decks that play the adventure engine at all. I think this is a really surprising top cut. I made a lot of predictions in my metagame overview, my initial reactions to the ban list. You guys can check that out as well. Prank Kids had the most representation, specifically Prank Kids Adventure. This is a really interesting deck. It's really basic and very easy to play. Pretty streamlined to do overall. See, two of them were actually playing Destiny Hero packages, so the DP version of the deck. This is really interesting. I'm not exactly certain why. It seems like just the double Regeki is good enough, as well as the adventure card. Just pushes your grind game enough to actually be able to play. And the Scythe Lock doesn't seem to really affect this nearly as much, because you can just go adventure stuff and then go Prank's Pandemonium during your opponent's main phase, and you summon Battle Butler from there. But I'm surprised to see how many Prank Kids were able to top this event. I don't think any of them necessarily made top 8. I can double check on that later though. I think someone won, or the winner was the Prank Kids version. But Lampseas and Dropseas, their burn and heal effects are relevant in time, especially for remote duels, because they tend to take a little bit longer. Counterintuitive, but yeah, I think this is a pretty good pick. I don't think it's the best deck though. I still think this is not number one deck. I still think there are a couple of others, some that we didn't even see really do very well compared to this deck, but this was really interesting to see. So the adventure Dragon Link deck, it's a lot like other decks, except you just can't use your normal summon effects. You can't use like Rocket Phrases Effect or Save for It, so they don't really play any more than maybe like one Save for It, right? Because you can't use its search effect the turn you use your adventure stuff. But this, I think, is a pretty good deck. With Proto's ban, I think it's able to do a little bit better. And I think it's one of the cooler decks to play the adventure engine. The fact that it can use Red Rose Dragon, Rocks Rose Dragon, those cards naturally in the deck is also nice. You can play worm stuff in there too if you really wanted. But the fact that it can just generate advantage off of those, and it still has the Striker Dragon plays with Red Rose Dragon, makes it a pretty strong pick. I'm glad to see this still doing well. Thing I'm not nearly as glad to see doing well is Drytron. I'm surprised this had three placements in the top 32. I don't think any of them made them past top 16. This is really interesting. So with Eva's ban, I expect this to drop off, and overall it really has. This is kind of a black swan event where this is not the normal to see 3 Drytron in top 32. One of them was playing the DP and Megalith package. One of them was just playing DP. One of them was just playing Megalith. So kind of a mix between all three. 1/3 representation between each. I think I haven't experimented with Drytron specifically too much, but at least for this format, I did back in the old days. But I think for this format, I don't think I'd play this deck, just because there are so many counters to it, and you do lose a lot with the Eva. The one good thing is that theoretically you could play Adventure with this and use Beatrice effect, but I don't think it's worth playing at all. Again, not really sure about these builds, but Bethor is a really good card. I'm glad to see that they were playing that, and also DP just tends to carry a lot of decks. And then we have the 3 Eldlich. 2 of them were playing the Cyber Gadget Engine and Adventurer. One of them, I think it was just like a trap version of the deck. And of course, one of those was our very own Zohair Khan. He did extremely well at this event. We are extremely proud of him. He's come a long way since he started playing the game. This was interesting too. I'm glad to see that this deck is doing well. Basically because it's turned into a combo deck. It hasn't really it's not really a stun deck anymore, because it's just better to play combo engines and then also have your Eldlich pieces, because at worst they just help break boards going second. That's really the best way. Only way is that only counter really is Herald of the Arclight. But yeah, I think this is good representation. I think this is pretty much expected. Still don't think this is the same representation it should have. I think it should be a little bit lower. Again, there were a couple hundred players for this event, I think around 600. So I guess it's fair enough to see this many Eldlich players in here. And then we have Virtual World. I think this is still a really, really good pick, especially with the Adventure engine. Adventure stuff just synergizes so well with them, because none of your Virtual World monsters have on-summon effects. Normal summon effects, anything like that, they all do stuff in the hand. And with Fateful Adventure, you can discard your some of your gates, like Qinglong, and then just add. Droll is a very good card against the deck, though, but I don't think we saw nearly as many main deck Drolls, more so side decks. I think that was one of the reasons why this was able to do pretty well. But I still think this is a very strong deck, especially versus Prank Kids. Shen Shen is a really, really powerful card against that deck. And then we have Phantom Knight. Yeah, I think this deck is about where it should be. I don't think this is great. I don't think the deck's nearly as good. I think people have figured that out by now, that just the fact that it can do Scythe Lock and everything doesn't mean that it's great. Yeah, but it's still good to see it top. I like the deck. I just don't think it's nearly as good as some of the others. Yeah, and next we have the Adventure Synchro Good Stuff deck. This is mostly playing the synchro summon cards that you play, like Baron de Flor, Yazi, Evil of the Yang Zing, Rocks Rose Dragon, Red Rose Dragon, all that good stuff. Really, it's just a turbo Baron de Flor, sometimes Artifact Scythe, Shooting Riser Dragon, and Herald of the Arclight. That is the combo, especially so that they can't droplet you. If you summon Arclight, you can't send monsters from your hand to the graveyard for the cost of droplet. That is the whole idea of that deck. That is one of the reasons why they also can play Destrudo. They can also play Fairy Tale Snow. All really good options. There are a bunch of different ways to play this deck, and I'm glad to see that this is all taking off. I'm really glad just to see a bunch of Adventure Good Stuff decks taking off, especially with the higher deck count. I don't really like higher deck counts, but I am glad to see that it is kind of making an impact in the way that we build decks right now. And next off, we have Floowandereeze. I think this is a pretty good choice overall, though I just don't think it's as good as Adventure decks. It has really strong matchups versus some decks like Tri-Brigade. Right now, Tri-Brigade, some decks that link summon a lot. But overall, I just don't think it's nearly as strong as every single other deck, mainly because of Dracoback being a card. Dracoback and One Room Griffin really make the Adventure deck really, really strong, especially with Eldlich and other similar kind of floaty decks, Prank Kids, for example, especially Prank Kids, because the barrier statue doesn't really affect them nearly as much, because if they have the cards to summon Butler, cool, they can summon Butler, it's a wind. Likewise, it can also summon Doodle Doo, because it is also a win if they do that barrier statue lock. I think this is still a good pick. I'm glad to see that it did make top 4. It did have a pretty good conversion rate overall. Yeah, I don't think there's much else to say. I think it's just going to see a little more development, but the actual deck building, I think, is solved for the format, for right now at least. Just because it doesn't really care about Scythe at all. You got the quick play in Battle of Chaos, but I don't think there's anything else it can really do besides just people playing it more if they think it's a good choice. Nothing else to say about it. And the next we have the Tenyi Sword Soul Link deck. So this is what I was playing near the end of last format. This is playing the Fibrax Auroradon deck, or Auroradon engine rather. This is kind of what I was going to play. Now I'm on Adventure Tenyi stuff, Adventure Sword Soul, anything like that. This was a really cool deck, and it plays just like the old Sword Soul versions, where you just use Fibrax to summon Yazi or Baron de Flor or Herald, anything like that, and get your plays going. That's basically the reason, and it converts really well if you're playing something like, if your monster gets hand trapped and you have Edhara plus a normal summon, anything like that, or Ecclesia going second, and you can just break boards that way. I think this is a really strong pick too. Just anything with Sword Soul, anything that can play Fibrax is really good right now, because all those cards are kind of warping the game right now. But I think this will continue to see more success, especially post ban list, whatever comes up this coming list. I think it'll still be a strong pick, so long as they're not hitting engine cards, which who knows if they will. A good pick overall, though. I think it has a lot of flexibility for this format. And then next up we have the Plunder Patrol Adventure. This is one of my favorite decks for this format. I think this is a really cool way to play the deck, especially because it's just Plunder Patrol. I mean, that's really what it is. You don't really need to use your normal summon effects because Plunder Patrol doesn't really have any. At least during your turn, you just summon a bunch of monsters. Helps you summon actually Baron de Fleur. That is one of the really cool plays you can do. A bunch of plays with Fibrax, a bunch of plays with all your Toolbox cards. That's really what it is. It's not a bad pick right now, especially with Impermanence not being seen as much play right now. Still a strong pick overall. I actually may pick up this deck or play this instead. Yeah, really cool deck. Really cool way to play this. A lot of attributes that Plunder Patrol likes: light, fire, water, and dark. Those are the 4 that they have right now. If they ever get any more ships, cool. But those, every single deck is playing those in some way. Basically, especially with the adventure stuff. So you always have those waters available. You always have darks available with hand traps or you know, main deck engines, anything like that. I think that they're really, really strong plays. I think it's a really, really cool deck. I may end up making a video about this to just how to play the deck because I think it's really, really nice. But yeah, next up we have Sky Striker Venturer. This is a really interesting list. I'm not going to show you guys the list right now. You guys can see that some other time. It's just a really interesting list. I just don't think it's good enough though, and it was the only Sky Striker list to play. I don't know if it played DP. Who knows? No other Sky Strikers made top 32 for good reason. I don't think that deck's nearly good enough to really play. It's just Sky Striker with the Adventure Engine. You don't really need to use Raise Effect during your own turn. Yeah, it just seems natural to play it anyway. Nothing else to really say about that. It's just Striker. Yeah, and then next up we have the Adventurer Tenyi Worm. This is the Toolbox deck that I really like to play right now. This just summons your Baron de Fleur and goes either into Artifact Scythe or Fairy Tale Snow, whichever build you choose. And basically just, again, summon Baron de Fleur, Herald of the Arclight, and either Scythe or Snow, whichever one you want to choose. And that is the entire toolbox. It has a lot of really strong plays though going second. I think it plays into a lot of boards more easily than other decks because Vishuda is such a strong card. That card is just insane, especially right now. Yeah, I would have liked to see this top a little bit more, but I'm glad to see that it had at least one representation. I don't think it's nearly the best deck. It does have a lot of weaknesses in the way it plays. It requires a lot of hand pieces and a lot of things to go right, but it is nevertheless a very strong deck. And then we have the 1DD deck. This was Pack, of course, making top 32 with this. Zohair actually was the one loss Pack had day 1. He did play versus Zohair. Yeah, I think this is a cool deck to play. I don't know if it's necessarily best, but I still think it's strong enough to play. With the new support cards in Battle of Chaos, DD Griffin is an extremely potent card. It solves so much for the deck. I'd like to play this a lot more. Just haven't had the time to really test it out. I think it is strong though with the boards, and even though they don't have all the Omni negates that every other deck tends to have, they still have enough, and they do enough, they float enough to make up for that difference in not having those negates. I think this is a strong pick overall. I'm interested to see where this goes. And then we have the Earth Machine Toolbox. You guys have seen this for a while. This has been around for almost a year now, the Earth Machine Good Stuff deck. Glad it made top 32. There's really nothing else to say about it. It just floats and draws cards. Doesn't really do anything else. Not very proactive deck. Yeah, it doesn't do anything. Nothing else to say about that. Cool that it got the one spot, but yeah, nothing super interesting. Congratulations to the player. Yeah, and then the one Mech Knight. Mech Knight, of course, seems to be a really good rogue pick. Every single format. It seems to be one of those decks now with Girsu still being at 3 in the TCG. Just seems to be a pretty good pick overall. Yeah, because the World Legacy Secret Lock is really, really strong. Only card that really invalidates a lot of it is Dracoback. Just that card just does so much for the deck. But it is cool to at least see the one Mech Knight. Again, just like the Earth Machine Toolbox, this deck has been around for a while. Glad to see it top, but it's not really anything different or too different than what we've seen before. And then finally, just want to take a quick look at the Adventure. It looks like it's around 50%, a little bit over 50% for representation for the Adventure engine. This is close to a tier 0 strategy. I really try and stay away from the tier stuff. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Tier 1, tier 0, tier 2, 3, etc. They don't really make a whole lot of sense to talk about, but this is where it's getting to the representation where it needs to be hit at some point. Over 50% representation in a top 32, even for a remote duel event, is a lot. That is a little bit too much. And Sword Soul saw almost a similar representation end of last format. Adventure just took over. I mean, plain and simple. You know, that's how it is. Adventure took over. Engine needs to be hit at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, because it is very, very strong, because it's just so powerful. But I think seeing that it is, you know, basically 50%, if you're not playing Adventure at all, you better have a good reason to not play it, either because you're playing something like DDD, where you basically can only summon those monsters with Gilgamesh's effect, the Tenyi Sword Soul deck, playing Fibrax and Auroradon, Mech Knight, Earth Machine, any of those, you're not going to be playing Adventure usually, or Drytron usually. But besides those, you basically need to play it. Every single deck that doesn't have an on-summon normal of a normal summon effect, you need to play the Adventure engine. That's basically it. Your bricks don't even matter. Just your deck does everything. Your engine does everything for you. Yeah, let me know what you guys think about this representation. Really, really interesting. I'm curious to see what the next big remote duel YCS has. I don't think it's going to look nearly the same. I think people are going to play around the Adventure stuff a little bit more, be a little bit more careful, probably play even more hand traps. We saw a bunch of 60-card decks, pile decks, whatever you want to call it, make top 32. I'm curious to see if we ever go back down to 40 with the Adventure stuff. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Again, love reading your guys' comments. But yeah, this is Eric with OzoneTCG. See you guys in the next one.